We must believe in God with Philotimo. Geranda. I am troubled by the thoughts of unbelief that come to me. The fact that you are troubled by them and do not accept them means that these thoughts come from the evil one. Sometimes Christ allows thoughts of doubt or unbelief in order to test our disposition and our Philotimo. For our God is not a myth like Zeus, Apollo, but a real and living God. And our faith is a true and living faith. We have a cloud of witnesses in the saints, as Saint Paul says, who knew Christ, who lived with him, and who sacrificed themselves for him. And in our own present time, there are people devoted to God who have heavenly experiences and are in communion with the angels, the saints, and even with Christ and Panagia. I'm going to share something from my own life to help you. You see, I, too, can be a blood donor. I reveal certain events to be helpful. Where I see heaped up knowledge and neglected faith, I want to strengthen the faith by relating some events and examples of faith. When I was a young boy in Konica, I read about the lives of many saints, and sometimes I gave the books to the other boys to read, or I would gather them in one place and we would read together. I marveled at the great degree of asceticism and the fasting that the saints did, and tried to do the same. From fasting, my neck had become as thin as a cherry stem. The children teased me. Your head will fall off, they would say to me. What I had to put up with, well, never mind. In addition, because I often got sick from fasting, my older brother was afraid that I would not be able to finish school. So he would take and hide my little pamphlets with the lives of the saints. After that, I started hiding them in the forest, at a country chapel of Saint Barbara, and would go there secretly to read them. One day a neighbor named Costas said to my brother, I will make him change his way of thinking, throw away those booklets he is reading, and give up his fasting and prayer. He found me, I was about 15 years old. Then, and he started talking to me about Darwin's theory. He started talking and went on and was making my head spin. In my haze, I headed for the forest, to the chapel of Saint Barbara. I went in and began praying to Christ. My Christ, if you exist, reveal yourself to me in some way. I kept saying while constantly doing prostrations for a long time. It was summer. The sweat was running down my body and I was drenched and completely exhausted. But I didn't hear or see anything. Nor did God help me in any way with even a small sign, some sound, some shadow. I was only a child after all. Even if one were to look at this from a human and logical perspective, one could say, my God, what a shame for the poor child. From 11 years old, he has been going up to the hills to live ascetically, and now he is going through a crisis. That man made his head spin with some foolish theories. At home, he has difficulties with his brother. He ran to the forest to seek help from you, and yet nothing. Exhausted from the many prostrations, I sat down for a while. Then I thought, all right, when I asked Costas what he thought about Christ, what did he tell me? He told me that Christ was the best, the most righteous man, who proclaimed righteousness and had so offended the Pharisees that they crucified him out of envy. Then I said, if Christ was such a good man, so righteous, and no other man had ever appeared like him, and others killed him out of envy, then it is right of me to do for this man far more than I have done, even to die for him. As soon as I looked at it this way, Christ appeared to me in a great light. The chapel was full of light, and told me, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he die, yet shall he live. These same words I could also read in the open gospel which he held in one hand. There was such an inner transformation in me that I found myself saying constantly, "Come here now, Costa, to discuss if there is or there isn't a God." You see, for Christ to appear, he waited for my Philotimo-filled response. Now, if Christ requires such a response from even a young child, can you imagine how much more he would expect from a mature adult? Some people, Geranda, have their doubts about the divine plan of salvation as a whole. But how can the whole story of Christ be considered a myth? All the things we read in the prophets who lived 700 years before Christ and speak of him in such detail, doesn't this make them wonder? The Old Testament even refers exactly to the amount of money that would betray Christ. Then it says that the Jews will not put this money into the treasury of the temple, because it is blood money, but will use it to buy a field to bury strangers. The prophecy of Zechariah was fulfilled, as were other prophecies. Things were made so clear. There were such tiny details. There is even a reference to Jesus' clothing and how it would be divided among the soldiers at a crucifixion. And all these things were spoken so many years before the birth of Christ. How then can I bear a thought of doubt? Also we see the Apostle Paul, he was a persecutor of the Christians. He was on his way to Damascus for this purpose, but Christ appeared to him and said, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he asked, Who are you, Lord? And the Lord replied, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. And then the Lord informed Ananias to receive and baptize Saul. After that, we see how much the Apostle Paul struggled and suffered to preach the gospel to all the nations. Then there are the innumerable martyrs, estimated to be 11 million. Here all these people lost their mind. How can anyone forget all of these things? How can one not believe after reading the gospel even a little? And if there were a few more details, this too would help everyone to believe. But God did not permit this, for people need to pass through the sieve to be tested. God wants to see who loves him, who sacrifices himself for him, without expecting miracles and so forth. A Philotimo-filled man, I believe, cannot be adversely affected, no matter how many blasphemous things he may hear. One must believe in God with Philotimo, not by expecting to be convinced through a miracle. When I see grown-up people asking for a miracle in order to believe, I get very annoyed. If they were young children, there would be some excuse. But for adults who have done nothing for Christ to say, we must see something in order to believe. Well, this is very cheap. Even if they saw a miracle, do you think such people will be helped to believe? They would probably say that it's a trick, it's sorcery, and so on.